You're listening to the Dead Presidents Podcast.
I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
And I'm James J. Hamilton.
And the reason we are here today is to play a game of presidential war.
Presidential war. What is it good for? Intellectual stimulation. Say it again now. Presidential war. What is it good for? Presidential.
Welcome to the Dead Presidents Podcast. We are back with another exciting episode of Presidential War. We've got our cards dealt. We've got our category cards ready. We have the presidential playing card deck.
And we're ready to drop some fact bombs on your ass.
This game that we invented, intellectually stimulating, as the song says. You can play at home, and you can write into the podcast if you disagree with our rulings or our discussions. We have the complete book of U.S. presidents here to guide us, because we don't know everything about the presidents off the top of our heads yet.
Takes time.
Someday.
Indeed. Someday soon. So, let us begin this game of war with the first flip of the first cards. And here we go.
I have got Andrew Jackson.
And I have Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The first category card, biggest partier. I actually think Jackson got on biggest partier in the last game, did he not? I think it was him and Wilson.
Perhaps.
In game one of presidential war.
Yeah, Jackson, he's a noted partier. Jackson inherited some money as a young man. He went out and blew it all gambling and carousing.
Indeed.
He liked the cockfights, the horse races. Definitely, apparently, allegedly favored Old Crow whiskey, according to a old magazine I had, an Old Crow advertisement using Andrew Jackson and James K. Polk to sell their whiskey.
That's right. And yeah, that always struck me as funny because of its inclusion of Polk. But we'll talk about the White House liquor policy under the Polk administration in episode 11. As for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, dude partied.
Yeah, he partied as well.
But, I mean, as president, like, Prohibition's gonna end.
Yeah.
So, that's something, and, I mean...
I think FDR liked to play bartender.
Yeah.
At gatherings and pour drinks for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough call, because the definition of a partier over time changes. I mean, I don't know that in the circumstance a young FDR would be at the cockfights or the horse races. Perhaps he would.
Yeah, I don't know as much about young FDR's partying.
All we know is he had money, and he could afford to party if he wanted to.
Yeah.
I think Jackson has that. Well, yeah. Yeah, that's true, too. He was definitely partying in that sense. If you count partying in the boudoir.
Yep.
FDR was doing his share of that. And it's a bit of a tough call, but I think I would have to hand it to Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, I think I would agree. We're going to have Jackson take the first hand, or rather, I will win the first hand with my Jackson card. We'll move on to the next hand when I will draw John Tyler.
And I have drawn Theodore Roosevelt.
The category? Looks.
Looks. I'd give it to John Tyler. John Tyler kind of reminds me of Eric Idle from Python a little bit.
Yeah.
Eric Idle could have played John Tyler.
Yeah, he's pretty, seems like a pretty tall, thin, handsome
kind of,
man.
Sunken cheekbones, classic Roman nose.
I mean, obviously, at 54 years old, he landed a hot 24-year-old bride.
Yeah.
Had to be still hanging in there in the looks department to pull that off.
Yeah, and, I'm not going to knock Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, he's a distinguished-looking guy.
Yeah, he certainly has that rugged masculinity.
Sure.
Has a tough mustache.
Yeah. I mean, he could beat the shit out of John Tyler.
Definitely.
I mean, there's no question of that. If you were a filly seeking a stud, that's a solid question between those two. Look how many children John Tyler sired.
Yeah.
And into late age. Roosevelt himself had a large family, too.
Yeah, TR.
I'm kind of diverting. I'm kind of going into, if you were a lady, which president would you rather hook up with? But this is just based solely on looks, and I guess in that case, yeah, I mean, I'd give it to Tyler.
Yeah, I think Tyler, just in pure looks, I think TR probably has the better, more personality and more to offer the ladies beyond looks.
It's still a tough call. Like, I think of like a John Tyler being like the epitome of like a Virginia aristocrat, like dressed to the nines and, looking pretty good. But then again, Roosevelt would have like Tiffany cufflinks and like probably a Tiffany like watch fob and shit like that. I mean,
yeah, listeners,
the pince-nez.
Listeners, you probably know what Teddy Roosevelt looks like, but if you don't know John Tyler off the top of your head, Google him. See if anything happens down in your underpants area. But I think we're going to, give this hand to John Tyler.
If that doesn't work, look up his wife, Julia Gardner Tyler.
So I think we're going to give Tyler this hand?
Yeah, we'll give Tyler this hand.
Next hand, I have drawn James Madison.
And I have Grover Cleveland Feist Time.
Yep,
with the category Post-Presidential Accomplishments. Well,
yeah, that's the thing. Grover Cleveland, he served 2 non-consecutive terms as 22nd and 24th president. Right, he has 2 cards in the deck.
So technically, this card, his first term, his biggest post-presidential accomplishment was being reelected president.
Yeah, when you split up Grover Cleveland that way, he does have the best post-presidential accomplishment ever, which is getting to be president again.
Yeah. It's a pretty interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, that's pretty huge for first-term Cleveland. Tons of presidents got beat, and lots of presidents tried to run for non-consecutive terms.
Indeed.
Van Buren,
Grant
Fillmore,
considered it.
Yeah, Grant, TR. Cleveland's the only one who pulled that off. Yeah. Most presidents, once they lose or they're out, they're done and they're dead. But Cleveland came back. James Madison, he didn't do anything major in his post-presidency. He was retired.
Just other than being distinguished and respected
being
for who he
an
was.
Elder statesman. I think he weighed in against nullification and secession in the nullification crisis.
Yeah.
He served on the board of the University of Virginia with Jefferson, was at the Virginia Constitutional Convention in the 20s, I think, for the state of Virginia. But Grover Cleveland, first term, his post-presidency.
Yeah. That actually, this might be just that unique circumstance where this is the best possible card that you could have for this particular category.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the other, presidents with best post-presidencies, probably John Quincy Adams.
JQA.
Taft.
And Taft becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but...
which was basically his dream job, so...
Yeah. But, maybe even neither of them is as good as becoming president
obviously
again.
This is a technicality, but Cleveland himself couldn't say for sure that he was going to get reelected 4 years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, history would, you'd think, be against him.
He won the popular vote, but lost the election.
Against Benjamin Harrison,
Against Benjamin Harrison. And bided his time. 4 years later, came back and was reelected president. Obviously, it's the only time that's ever happened in history. Up until this point. And that's a pretty huge post-presidential accomplishment.
Yep.
If you put it in the context of first term Cleveland, which that's how we're playing the game.
Yep, that's how the deck is made out.
This one goes to Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
Next hand, I'm going to draw Calvin Coolidge.
And I will have Rutherford Burchard Hayes.
They're going head-to-head in the category Effect on the Office of the Presidency.
Well, unfortunately for Rutherford Hayes, he kind of falls into that kind of bog of quote-unquote forgettable presidents of that time, which is unfair and something that we're remedying just with our very show.
Yeah.
Is that no president left behind. And that's a policy that will work.
Mm-hmm.
It just, a lot of people look at Hayes, Garfield, Arthur, Benjamin Harrison, and some people even will throw Cleveland in there. Johnson, Grant as just middle-of-the-road average or worse presidents. Well, and that's unfair.
It's probably a time also when Congress was pretty assertive. And,
right. Especially after Andrew Johnson.
Yeah.
Congress does become a lot more...
Prominent,
yeah. So, Hayes, good or bad presidency aside, he didn't really have much of an effect on the office of the presidency.
No.
And if there was, any effect, it might have had something to do with the way the spoils system worked, and that's something that his successor would completely fix.
Yeah.
As for Coolidge, I think his effect on the presidency is resounding. Or at least it should be. I think that... Well, I'm a little bit biased. Coolidge is my favorite Republican president, hands down, just personally. And I think that, he's kind of like the best, hearkening to the ideals of Jefferson.
Yeah, for his era.
And, later down the road, Reagan would agree. Reagan had a picture of Coolidge hanging in the Oval Office. He really admired the way that he ran the government.
Yeah, that's kind of why I would think Coolidge would win this category, because, way down the line, somebody like Reagan would see him as a model.
Exactly.
And maybe Reagan doesn't. By Reagan's time, it's a much more into the imperial presidency type thing, so he's not necessarily doing things the way Coolidge was, but he still had that as kind of an ideal.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think Coolidge definitely had a pretty sound effect on the presidency. Unfortunately, his example isn't followed enough, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well,
But I think that band will go to Silent Cal.
Yeah. Once we get to episode 30 and future presidents listen to that episode, they'll be following Cal's example as well.
I think they will, if they know what's good for them.
Yeah.
And next up, I got Zachary Taylor.
I've got William Jefferson Clinton. And their category is relationship with the Constitution.
Actually, I think Zachary Taylor came up with this card last game. Now, the relationship with the Constitution here, we got a problem when it comes to Bill Clinton.
Yeah?
Yep.
Did he deny having a relationship with the Constitution? I did not have a relationship with the Constitution. He had one, good or bad.
Well, I mean, whether or not he, used the Constitution sexually, I mean, like I was picturing like a rolled up Constitution and shoving it. Sorry. It's just that my train of thought was going nowhere, so I felt I had to explain. But yeah, I mean, he lied under oath. Lied. The president. How dare he?
Yeah. Very unpresidential.
Very unpresidential to lie.
Yeah. Well, he was impeached, obviously, didn't get convicted.
Yeah, I mean... Was lying unconstitutional?
Well, not necessarily.
Yeah,
I mean, but what's an impeachable offense is, up to Congress. He lied under oath in a deposition in the Paula Jones case.
Right.
Which was, yeah. So,
obviously,
it's a crime, and whether it's
you're
impeachable...
a listener to the show, which, of course you are, you know all about this.
Yeah. He was only number 3 on the top 5 presidential adulterers.
Yeah.
But he was in there. Yeah, I should think that whole episode ought to have served as a precedent against trying to impeach the president for private marital issues. He didn't lie about, public policy or anything he did as president.
Right.
That for his impeachable offense.
Yeah.
But I don't know. With a White House intern, kind of playing a little fast and loose.
Yeah.
With his role.
It's just hard to define sometimes relationship with the Constitution.
Yeah, these last 2 categories, effect on the office of the presidency and relationship with the Constitution, are the two most kind of wishy-washy categories, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to come up with enough categories to make you do for every hand.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you have ideas for other categories, feel free to
let us
hit
know.
us up on Twitter or Instagram or wherever the fuck, basically. We're pretty much everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, Zachary Taylor, he liked the Constitution.
He sure did.
But he died, he was in there.
I don't think he knew much about the Constitution. I mean, Christ, he'd never voted before he became president. He didn't vote in his own election, even. He had never belonged to any political party, never professed any type of political knowledge. He was literally just a soldier. For his life. He was a lifelong soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And then he became president. So, I mean, to his benefit, I think standing up against the spread of slavery, despite being a slave owner, is admirable to a certain extent.
Yeah,
I mean, I guarantee the guy never read the whole Constitution.
Well, that doesn't necessarily, defeat him in this category. Somebody who's, a lawyer like Bill Clinton, very familiar with the Constitution, also, thinks he can, dance his way around it a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I think that what Taylor came to understand of the Constitution, let's put it that way, he was rock solid.
Yeah, he died in office while the Compromise of 1850 was in the works and was kind of leaning against what his successor later signed off on.
Right.
I'd probably give this category to Taylor.
I think we could do that.
Yeah. Go on to the next hand where I have drawn Jimmy Carter.
And I have drawn, speak of the devil, it's Millard Fillmore.
No. The Taylor successor we just mentioned will go up against Jimmy Carter in strength of presidential appointments.
Well, now this is one where we're going to want to take the complete book of U.S. presidents to hand. Now, the best thing I could say for Fillmore, I believe I said in our first game, and that is Daniel Webster. He was Fillmore's first cabinet appointment and acted as an intermediary in feeling out other prospective appointees before Fillmore would broach them. So, Daniel Webster, monumental Secretary of State, and that's just a straight up, that's the first person Fillmore goes to.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, Millard Fillmore is the president now, and he's thinking to himself, I hate motorcycles. And then after that, he thinks to himself, who's the first person that I could get to help me out? Who's the best person here? None other than Daniel Webster. So, that's pretty fantastic. Most of these other fellas, yeah, you got John J. Crittenden of Kentucky, You got the Crittenden Compromise later on. That's a doomed last-minute bid to avert the Civil War following Lincoln's election.
Crittenden was kind of a big shot, though.
Yeah, so, but other than them, not too many people of note. One Supreme Court appointment, Benjamin R. Curtis of Massachusetts.
I'm looking up Carter here. He has no Supreme Court appointments. Didn't get that chance.
Just for fun, I just want to say that Fillmore's first choice over Benjamin R. Curtis was another fellow from Massachusetts who would decline the appointment, Rufus Choate.
Didn't get Justice Choate. I'm looking at Carter's cabinet appointments here in the complete book of U.S. presidents, and I don't know if it's maybe a confession of my own ignorance, but I'm not really seeing anybody whose name jumps out at me as being somebody who's particularly famous.
I can't think of anybody in the Carter administration, really, myself either.
No.
The one thing that I would say about the Carter presidency that absolutely stands out as really good isn't a presidential appointment, and that's Vice President Walter Mondale.
Yeah.
Who was a game changer in terms of the vice presidency. Really. Walter Mondale is a super important vice president. He was definitely more involved in day-to-day politics, and working with the president than anybody previously.
Yeah. And you got to give
it... by quite a bit.
You got to give it to Carter to give him that role.
That's right.
And also picked him to be the running mate.
Yeah, so I guess that could be a technical appointment. Mondale was nominated for vice president, but it was Jimmy Carter that gave him, the go-ahead to turn the vice presidency into something a little bit more than it was. And, like, we're just talking previously, Gerald Ford didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah.
When he was vice president. He was kind of in the dark there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Truman in the dark upon FDR's death.
Right.
It's probably a good direction to move in to keep the vice president more involved.
It's not technically an appointment, but, like, he gave him the ability to do that, and he did it, like, supremely well. Like, Mondale's one of our better vice presidents.
Yeah, and in the more modern era, the presidential nominee really does get to pick the vice presidential nominee. So Carter did make the call to put him on the team, really. Yeah. And listeners, if any of our listeners has a particular hard-on for any of Jimmy Carter's cabinet appointments who you think we're not that we should know about, then let us know. But I don't know. I probably got to give this hand to Millard Fillmore. Turn into Daniel Webster.
Is a
tough debate.
Solid move.
Yeah.
Solid move on the part of Millie Film.
So, move on to the next hand. I'm drawing James Buchanan.
And I'm drawing Abraham Lincoln.
Uh-oh. Back-to-back, 15 and 16. What's the category?
We have who would win in a fight?
Ooh.
Well, there's absolutely no question here. Interesting fact about James Buchanan, he was nearsighted in one eye and farsighted in the other eye. So he had to kind of turn his head a certain way and kind of squint one eye a little bit, and that led to him being referred to as a winking and fidgeting old maid at one point by a contemporary.
Wow. Yeah, and as these two arguably the greatest president and worst president, there's probably just as big of a gap between them in who would win in a fight.
I agree.
So you recall, Lincoln was, he was what, number 4 on our most top 5 athletic presidents?
I believe he was.
Due to his wrestling, brawling ability.
That's right. I think we could probably set up a scene for you here right now. James Buchanan not looking too good. One of his eyes seems to be bothering him, James. He's circling around the ring, and Lincoln just toying with him now. He's just toying with Buchanan, throwing these... With that reach, Buchanan can't get inside. He's stumbling around. He's looking like a fool. It looks like... Oh, God, it's the Railsplitter.
It's over.
That's over. Lincoln... Abraham Lincoln, he gave him the Railsplitter. James Buchanan is down for the
He looks like he may be dead in the ring.
My God, what a slobber knocker. So that's pretty much how that would go.
Yeah.
And so, with that, we give the hand to Abraham Lincoln.
Next hand, I draw James K. Polk.
And I have drawn Ulysses Simpson Grant. Uh-oh. We got First Lady looks. Grant again.
Wow.
Not this time, Julia. Bum, bum, ba-dum.
Yeah, if you recall our first Presidential War episode, Julia Grant also coming in on First Lady looks in a shocking victory by going up against
Bachelor James Buchanan,
who had no First Lady. Julia Grant won in an essential forfeit, but not against Sarah Polk.
Yeah, it was a technicality. We kind of disqualified Harriet Lane, but hey. This time, no chance. Sarah Polk is, well, for me personally, beau ideal of a woman.
Yeah. One of the best First Ladies, period, and not too shabby in the looks department.
Sarah Polk, incredibly well educated for her time, went to different academies that most women would never have had the chance to attend. She was pretty much her husband's equal in terms of their partnership.
Yeah.
They were, as John and Abigail Adams were, closest confidants. with one another. And
that's all well and good, but in this category, we're just trying to objectify these women.
oh, yeah, that's right.
We're not interested in her look or her accomplishments and her smarts.
Yeah, I totally forgot. Yeah, so she's absolutely better looking than Julia Grant. Congratulations.
Most definitely.
The hand is yours.
Yeah. That's a different category we're going to get to later. Next hand, I've got Andrew Johnson.
And I have drawn John Quincy Adams.
Our category, military accomplishments.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I don't know that either of them were in the military at any time. Andrew Johnson was military governor of Tennessee, which led to him being the vice president.
Yeah.
Under Abraham Lincoln.
I'm gonna look up.
There wasn't really any military action of note during John Quincy Adams' presidency.
Yeah, I'm seeing here in the complete book of U.S. presidents, Johnson, of course, military governor of Tennessee, held the rank of brigadier general in that capacity. Doesn't list any other previous military service. I guess as president, he had some military responsibility of at least winding down the army and pardoning a lot of Confederates. John Quincy Adams certainly never served in the military.
No, and there's really not too much going on militarily during his administration here. I think probably just standard.
Yeah, it was a peaceful time.
Yep.
So I think probably Andy Johnson will win
this one.
As military governor of Tennessee.
Indeed. Next up, I'm going to have William Henry Harrison.
And I've got his grandson, Benjamin Harrison.
Uh-oh.
Keeping it in the family.
Which of these Harrisons is better in this following category? It's relationship with Congress. Well, I think this might be, based on the brevity of Harrison's administration, we might have to go with Benjamin Harrison, because William Henry Harrison's initial engagements with Henry Clay and Congress didn't go over too well. William Henry Harrison said, Mr. Clay, you keep to your end of Pennsylvania Avenue, and I will keep to mine. So, right off the bat, Congress tries to bully William Henry Harrison, a war veteran and general, into basically toeing the line for them, for Henry Clay, and he basically says, get bent.
Yeah,
I'm the president. Go to your end of the avenue, and you deal with what you deal with, and I'll be the president.
Yeah.
So, his relationship,
well, it might not have been...
It was frayed.
It was frayed, but I think that's point to Harrison, because he at least stood up and didn't get bullied. I think they nominated...
You can't say Harrison because they're...
Yeah, they're both Harrison.
For William Henry Harrison.
William Henry. They nominated him, I think, on the idea that they were going to push him around, and he wasn't down with that.
Right.
Didn't get the chance to follow through on it.
Unfortunately not, because then, we would see how it would have turned out.
Benjamin Harrison, I'm looking him up in the complete book of U.S. presidents. He had some major legislation passed during his tenure. The Sherman Antitrust Act
I think
of 1890
had
is
a pretty fair time.
pretty huge.
I think he had a Republican Congress for
at
least part of his term, and he got to do a lot of stuff with bonuses for Civil War veterans and stuff that would not have happened if
the Dependent and Disability Pensions Act.
Yeah.
Sherman Antitrust Act, as I said, was huge, curbing monopolies. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act and McKinley Tariff Act, sponsored by Republican Representative and future President William McKinley of Ohio, was a protectionist tariff. Those all passed in 1890, a huge year for legislation.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, like, it's funny because most people, when you think of, like, Benjamin Harrison, it's just like nothing happened when Benjamin Harrison was president.
Yeah.
Well, actually, some legislative stuff happened. It's just you don't really hear about it a lot.
Yeah, that was huge. And all the, trust busting of, Theodore Roosevelt and stuff was on the basis of the Sherman Antitrust Act.
That's right.
So
give Ben Harrison some credit.
Yeah, I think he had a good relationship with Congress, at least in getting a lot of shit done in 1890.
Indeed. And I think, therefore, the hand goes to Benjamin Harrison.
Yep. Next hand, I've drawn John Adams.
And I have drawn Chester Alan Arthur. In their category, relationship with the people.
Wow.
That's an interesting one here.
Yeah, John Adams, he was never, or at least never thought of himself as getting the popularity he deserved.
Yeah.
That, it was Washington, Jefferson, that the people were fawning over, not giving him a lot of love.
That's right.
Relationship with the people.
In terms of Arthur, like, in that regard, he was looked at as pretty much a crook for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of their personality and relationships with people, John Adams, a little bit abrasive.
Yeah, and obviously as president he ended up going down the road of the Sedition Act, and
yeah, I mean, he could be stubborn and he could be opinionated, and he wouldn't shy from just straight up insulting people either.
Yeah.
Even if it was to their face in public, Whereas Arthur, like, really was pretty easygoing, got along with a lot of people. He was known for his midnight strolls around Washington with friends where they'd be out just walking the streets, going to different places. It would open up for him. He'd be out till 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he was easy to get along with.
He's just, a man of the people.
Like, even though people would criticize him for being a crook, nobody ever said, like, I dislike Chester Arthur, or he's difficult to get along with. Everybody that would come in contact him would pretty much agree that he was a polite, affable, friendly, easygoing, charming guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the Federalist...
Whereas Adams could be a little ostentatious.
Yeah, and the Federalist Party of Adams' time was really more kind of an elitist party who kind of thought itself above the passions of the people, and I think it might have actually been one of the members of Adams' cabinet wrote a letter, I think, to Hamilton one time, who said, like, we spent a lot of time getting all of our measures together and getting all the, insiders on board, but we don't, like, prepare the people or court the people's favor for them. So and obviously Adams was the last Federalist president because the people kind of turned against that whole deal.
Yeah.
And he wasn't,
that's true.
He wasn't doing anything to stop that.
No, certainly not.
The tide of popularity went against him to the Jeffersonians.
He just got indignant.
Stayed that way for decades.
Yeah. So I think I would give this one to Chester Arthur.
Yeah, I'd agree. Next hand, I will draw John F. Kennedy.
And I've drawn William Howard Taft.
Our category, First Lady Accomplishments. Dang,
well,
I wish I had Kennedy in the First Lady looks category.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of her accomplishments, though,
I think she still ranks
pretty
high.
Yeah. She was involved with a lot. I mean, it was Camelot, man.
Yeah.
You know?
She
She's
was
in magazines, she's giving interviews, she's on television and in newspapers.
Yeah, in a way, her looks were so great, they became an accomplishment.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the public loved her.
Absolutely. She was very much adored.
Yeah. She gave the famous, tour of the White House that was on TV. That was an episode of Mad Men. Everyone was raving over her tour of the White House.
Nellie Taft was not a happy First Lady.
No.
No. She didn't really like when he was in the Philippines, and she wasn't big on that.
Yeah.
I think she probably felt the best when he was Chief Justice.
Yeah.
And it was kind of stable.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, more happy and there wasn't so much craziness. She wasn't into the circus of it.
No.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, Jackie Kennedy, pretty great. Another...
Jackie Kennedy embraced her role as First Lady. Nellie Taft shied from it.
Yeah. Maybe another Jackie Kennedy's accomplishments as First Lady, looking the other way on her husband, who was our #1 presidential adulterer.
Yeah.
If she had made a stink, could have been bad for the country.
Yeah.
She took one for the team on that one.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm going to look up Nellie Taft just to see if there's anything I'm really missing that would jump over me, but... Oh, well, this is an interesting fact. She was the first wife of a president to ride alongside her husband down Pennsylvania Avenue on Inauguration Day.
Now, Jackie Kennedy also famously rode alongside her husband one day. And if you count her accomplishments the first few days after she stopped being First Lady unceremoniously, that was also a very incredible service on her part.
Yeah. So as for Nellie Taft, the reason she was kind of shying away from it, I kind of forgot that 2 months after she got there, she had a stroke.
Oh, yeah.
It affected her speech, and she never really fully recovered. In her most lasting contribution as First Lady, though, Mrs. Taft was the one that arranged for the planting of the 3,000 Japanese cherry trees that grace the Washington Tidal Basin. You could go and see them in bloom every year.
That's pretty nice.
Thanks to Nellie Taft.
But not going to be enough to beat Jackie Kennedy in this category.
No, unfortunately not. Actually, it says here that Nellie Taft, along with the wife of the Japanese ambassador, personally planted the first 2 saplings.
Cool.
In those ceremonies. So that's kind of fun. But, yeah, not enough to beat out Jackie O. And coming up next, I got old James Abram Garfield.
I've got James Monroe. Their category, pre-presidential accomplishments.
Well, I think we talked about this a little bit in our first game. Early presidents' pre-presidential accomplishments are almost by default going to win out over a lot of the later.
The presidents who served in the Revolution.
That's right, and James Monroe.
Monroe had a very long and distinguished pre-presidential career.
That's right.
Fought in the Battle of Trenton, crossing the Delaware, served in the military during the Revolution. He was in the Continental Congress. He was in the U.S. Senate. He was ambassador to France, later governor of Virginia, ambassador to Britain, helped negotiate the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah. I mean, the list goes
served
on and
as
on.
Secretary of State under Madison, acting Secretary of War under Madison. One of the top pre-presidential accomplishment guys.
Yeah, that's the thing with some of the early presidents just have like a serious advantage in that category. I mean, Garfield, he was in the Civil War. State senator from Ohio, U.S. representative from Ohio. He was an ordained minister.
Not too shabby.
But, I mean, that's pretty like we had, I think, in the last game, the hand was Lincoln and Hayes. And it's like, Hayes, rather, had like a similar kind of rise as Garfield did, whereas Lincoln actually, though we did say he didn't hold as many offices, he had a kind of extraordinary rise with the Lincoln-Douglas debates and things of that nature. So, I mean...
Garfield kind of a compromise candidate as the Republican nominee.
That's right.
Whereas Monroe
he was truly a dark horse.
Monroe was the top guy in his party, bar none, by the time he got nominated.
This one's going to go to James Monroe.
Indeed. Next hand, I will draw Warren Harding.
And I will draw Franklin Pierce.
The category, the economy.
The economy. Well,
I think the economy was probably pretty good under Harding.
It is. This is where we're starting to see things starting to move up a little bit.
Yeah, Harding president in the early 20s, obviously leading into by the end of the decade, we'll have the Depression, but you have to be flying high in order to have a Depression. Yeah. Harding not traditionally recognized as that great of a president.
But things were not too shabby.
Yeah, he had some
overall
scandals. I'm looking at him in the Complete Book of U.S. Presidents. Let's see. There was a tariff. He established the Bureau of the Budget, the first time formal budgetary restraints were placed on federal expenditures. Some of his other things are more foreign policy related. He didn't really, so he didn't necessarily, and then, obviously before the Great Depression, really the president didn't have that much of a hands-on role in the economy. It was only afterwards that
we're basically
the government started regulating the economy more.
Judged off of how the economy was doing at the time that these guys were president, unless they had like a direct involvement in it.
Yeah.
In this case, they really didn't. Who was presiding when the economy was better at the time? Well, I mean, Harding.
Yeah.
When Pierce was president, I mean, I'm not saying that the economy was bad, but there was just a lot of, the gold rush had gone on, and was, it was still going on.
Yeah.
In 1853, when Pierce came into the presidency. I mean, there's a lot of new land out there that's still being discovered, so, I mean, it's hard to kind of with the context of the times for each of these guys, it's kind of difficult. I think from a modern standpoint, I think we'd probably say that it's tough. That's tough, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm
probably
leaning towards the economy. Just if it was like a graph that showed like a scale from president to president, I feel like the economy would be kind of moving a little bit up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going up on both of them, probably. I'd probably, we don't have the kind of numbers that we probably need to judge it in this way, but...
Well, it's tough, because usually,
yeah,
something that...
Pierce became president in, 1853 he took office? That's just a few years after the gold rush started. He had the Gadsden Purchase, purchasing the small strip of land in what is now southern Arizona, New Mexico. That was to complete the Transcontinental Railroad, which obviously was huge for the economy. I don't know, this feels like a kind of category that we should call a draw on.
I will agree to a draw.
Because we might not, I don't know that we know enough to judge, but they're both kind of in a very similar position.
I agree.
So we're, in the event of a draw, we're going to bet it all on the next hand in sudden death, when I will draw George W. Bush.
And I'll draw Martin Van Buren.
And they will be judged on relationship with the media.
Well, they both had a rough time with the media, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
I think maybe from a current standpoint, it's easy to say that Bush had it a lot worse than Van Buren did, but with the context of the times, Van Buren having, political cartoons and, toys and stuff, like we talked about.
Those, Harrison songs against him. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, George W. Bush had just a lot of media against him. He's president in, the heyday of Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert every night, ripping him a new one.
Among
Will Ferrell,
so many others.
Everybody else. Yeah, they both probably also had, Van Buren with some of the more, Democratic papers probably defended him.
Yeah.
George Bush,
But even with Bush, it went so far as I remember Rock Against Bush CDs.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, being objective, I would give it to Van Buren.
Yeah, I
think
agree.
having a better relationship with the media than
and
did
also,
George W. Bush.
Van Buren, in building the Democratic Party,
created his own media outlets.
Yeah, he was part of, he's the one who made sure the Democratic Party had its own newspapers to defend his points. So
yeah, thank you for clarifying. He didn't necessarily create his own media outlets, but basically,
made sure that they were being organized.
Made sure that there were Democratic newspapers.
So yeah, I think probably Van Buren will win this category.
Well, that's helpful for me because I was looking pretty
take all four of these cards. Yeah, I don't know. I got so caught up in the discussion, don't even really pay attention to who's winning. That's not what the game's about, people. It's about the intellectual stimulation. Next hand, I'm drawing Barack Obama.
I'm drawing Ronald Reagan.
The category, foreign policy.
That's tough. I think that's tough. Right off the bat with Reagan, the Contras jump out. Noriega.
Yeah. And then you got Obama, ISIS jumping out.
Yeah.
In kind of a similar thing. Obama went up against Libya. And then his obviously signal accomplishment in foreign policy, authorizing the bin Laden raid, taking out Osama bin Laden. Let's see.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, there was a U.S.-Canadian Trade Pact in 1988 promoted by Reagan and Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney over significant opposition, especially in Canada, and what this did was promise to establish virtual free trade between the two countries. It abolished tariffs and goods and services in stages until 1999. So, not too popular. Yeah, I mean, you got shit going on in Beirut. You got shit going on in Palestine. You got, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
yeah, that's pretty big.
That's pretty big.
I think there was also, wasn't there a major arms reduction deal made? Or a certain, like, I don't know.
If it was made, it was only made in name because, like,
Yeah, the thing was
military spending caused the deficit to absolutely soar through the Reagan administration.
well, I mean, the deficit soared in the Obama administration as well.
That's true.
Not necessarily on military spending.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and I think Reagan, with the military spending, is that Reagan's presidency is when the arms race had like a tipping point where Russia couldn't keep up anymore. And Reagan took the hardline stance. I mean, it's some people will say Reagan won the Cold War, which is probably a oversimplification.
I would say it is.
But, you know,
And what it led to.
as much as any other one person, he could probably claim that mantle.
Yeah.
Reagan got the hostages back. That's a foreign policy win for him.
Well, I mean, they pretty much did that to just fuck with Jimmy Carter. They literally waited until basically right after Reagan was inaugurated to do that.
Well, Reagan has the fortune to not be Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I mean, but, yeah. You got the Persian Gulf shit going on, Nicaragua and the Contra shit going on. You got Grenada. South African apartheid. I mean, so I guess the sole light in that is the Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall.
Well,
the
whole Soviet Union policy ended up working out. And,
Yeah.
I mean, that was the big thing.
Yeah.
Those other things are
The rest of it doesn't seem very
chump
good
change compared to it.
Yeah.
I'm looking in the complete book of U.S. presidents. It for Obama, it says it describes the Bin Laden raid as the one bright spot of his foreign policy.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, because
Was there...
I mean, there wasn't really anything that great. I think Reagan wins this category.
Yeah. By a hair.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of the stuff I wouldn't. I mean, it obviously wasn't him,
Yeah.
you know. But some of the stuff is sketchy to me.
Next category, or next hand, I've drawn Herbert Hoover.
And I've drawn Harry S. Truman.
The category, Best President Overall,
Well,
across the board.
just across the board. I mean, I think your opinion will be the same as mine, that Harry S. Truman is a pretty good president.
Yep.
Therefore, I would give it to him over Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover, better before and redeemed after. But during, no.
Yeah, he had a rough time.
He didn't cause the Great Depression, nor did his predecessor, Calvin Coolidge. But he did things that made it a hell of a lot worse. And his attack on the bonus March veterans is loathsome and a taint.
Yeah, that's a bad look.
Yeah. Yeah, not a good look. Truman? He's one of the ones where, like, kind of like Eisenhower, too. And a couple others. Cleveland. First term, out of the park. Second term,
Yeah.
But still, I mean, no question about it, Harry S. Truman is the better president overall when
Definitely.
put up against Herbert Hoover.
Yeah, he came in, kind of coming from nowhere, being almost a nobody as vice president, becoming president during the World War II without...
It's a haberdasher.
Wasn't in the loop, but he got in the loop.
Yeah, he had no idea that the atomic bomb was a thing until he became president, and they said, hey, this is an option, and he was like, Mother of God.
He got to press that button twice, and nobody else ever has since.
Thank God.
Well,
as he said himself, thank God it did come to us.
Yep. We'll move on to the next hand. I've got Richard Nixon.
Feels like we're getting a lot of successors, either in the actual game hand or from hand to hand with just amongst ourselves. Because I'm following Truman with Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Well, our category.
We should mention that Nixon was Eisenhower's vice president, by the way.
Indeed.
Going head to head now.
Category speeches and writings. Let's see. Well, Nixon wrote memoirs.
Yeah.
Gave the Checkers speech. That was a very important speech.
Well, yeah, here's a little list of books by Dwight Eisenhower. You have Crusade in Europe from 1948, a 2-volume book called The White House Years, Mandate for Change, 1953 to 1956, published 1965, Waging Peace, 1956-1961, published 1966, and At Ease, Stories I Tell to Friends, 1967. That sounds interesting.
Well, Nixon also wrote a lot of books.
He did.
He wrote 6 Crises in 1962. And then after his presidency, he wrote his memoirs. He wrote The Real War, a book called Real Peace, Strategy for the West. Book No More Vietnams. Book Leaders. Another book called 1999, Victory Without War, written in 1988.
Yeah, Nixon's, especially 6 Crises, was pretty popular.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, Nixon, it's not like he died, like, as reviled, hated by everybody, traitor, alone, and locked away from the world. Nixon got his, like, respect back by the end, and because of his writings and because of his political knowledge and his acumen, he was always being asked about current situations. He'd be on the news all the time, or people would interview him about this and that and ask his opinion on it. And, you know, he wasn't like how in the first game we talked about how JFK and LBJ would talk to Hoover about different things. It wasn't like that so much with Nixon. I don't think that presidents would go out of their way to talk to Nixon about different things, but I'm sure they did talk just as a sign of respect for a living president occasionally, but I think I'd probably give this one to Nixon, honestly. Just because he was kind of, I mean, for the only president to resign, he was able to kind of rebuild his reputation enough to be still a popular figure. And he's still a fairly popular figure amongst Republicans.
Yeah, they both wrote a lot of books. I don't know. Does Eisenhower have any, like, big speeches he's known for? He warned about the military-industrial complex. That was in some kind of speech or writing that people always reference that still.
Yeah, that's right.
But, Nixon, in terms of the checker speech...
With Nixon, the checker speech.
The checker speech is huge. Like, he was, in trouble in his campaign. He did that speech, and he... it was wildly popular.
Yeah. He has a couple famous speeches, like the one where he's like, well, they won't have Richard Nixon to kick around anymore.
Yeah.
He has more that jumps out in my mind than does Eisenhower.
Yeah, his speech, Nixon's speech, like, right when he was it after he resigned or his, like, last speech in office? Was pretty good.
Oh, his last speech to, like, the staff?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was a great speech.
Yeah, that's a good speech.
Yeah.
I mean, think what you will about him and Watergate.
He
could give a speech.
Really like that speech. Never be petty. Always remember that others may hate you. But those that hate you don't win unless you hate them.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
See, that still sticks with me. So, yeah, I think on that basis, I got to give it to... I can't just quote Dwight D. Eisenhower right now.
No. Yeah, well, Nixon's going to win this.
Mamie, it's up. Unofficially attributed quote to Dwight D.
We're paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Next hand, I've got William McKinley.
And I've got Gerald Ford.
The category, would most like to meet.
That's a tough one. Well, up until 2006, I guess you could have met Gerald Ford. See, for me, like, I automatically, when it comes to, like, who would I like to meet? I mean, yeah, I'm a huge Michigan fan. I'll bleed blue and maize for the rest of my days.
Yeah, Ford.
And it'd be awesome to talk to Gerald Ford about, like, his Michigan days. And I wouldn't mind, like, talking to him about his thoughts on, like, Watergate and what he was dealing with when all that was going on. But I think he was in the dark for the most part until it all happened. But I don't know. I think I have more of an affinity for the past. So when it comes to, like, who would I rather meet? A more modern president or a historical president? Like, even, and one, like McKinley, too, would be a super interesting one to meet.
I mean,
I'd love to meet Gerald Ford, but...
Yeah, McKinley was in the Civil War.
Yeah.
I'm sure he has some great Civil War stories. Yeah, it was just a different time back then, so it'd be more...
It'd be interesting to talk about what he thought about Hearst.
Yeah.
And the newspapers and, what really started that war.
Yeah, and just, like, get to know him better.
Spanish-American War, of course.
Feel like modern presidents, so you can see them on TV and everything. You get a sense of what they're like. It's harder to say about, president like McKinley.
Yeah, if it was who I'd rather hang out with, I'd rather hang out with Gerald Ford than William McKinley, but,
Probably like to meet McKinley more. We both went to Allegheny College. I could ask him what it was like back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be, just by default, it'd be, the further back you go, the more interesting it would be to meet the person.
All else being equal.
I mean, I'd rather hang out with Gerald Ford and watch a Michigan game. But I think it'd be more interesting to meet William McKinley, so I think I'd give that one to you.
Cool. Getting down to the last few hands.
Indeed.
This time I've got George H.W. Bush.
And I've got Woodrow Wilson.
Our category, who would you pick first in flag football?
George Bush.
Definitely George Bush.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really have to think about that one.
Yeah, he was number 3 on our top 5 most athletic presidents.
Yeah, and Wilson,
great baseball player.
as we talked about in the first game, is an academic. I mean, he strictly an academic. I wouldn't pick Wilson would probably be among the last picked in the lines of kids for flag football.
He doesn't seem very athletic at all.
Mm-mm.
Whereas George H.W. Bush jumping out of airplanes when he was, 90 years old.
On the Yale ball team.
Yeah, they had a very athletic aesthetic in their family.
That's going to George Bush.
Definitely.
And next up,
I've got Lyndon B. Johnson.
I've got Thomas Jefferson with the category Least Scandals. Well, this is kind of tough. It depends on how you look at this. Do you look at Sally Hemings as a scandal? Jefferson ignored it, and therefore it didn't become a scandal. Lyndon Johnson had to deal with Vietnam and the kids on the White House lawn saying, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?
Yeah.
And, all the crap going on over there and the war escalating. Pretty scandalous.
Yeah.
But not scandalous when you think about, Monica Lewinsky or Watergate, It's more just turbulent. Whereas the Sally Hemings thing could have been, a serious scandal, but,
Well, nobody, or not enough people cared.
Yeah.
The Federalist press would, make fun of him for it, but it didn't turn into anything, and nobody who mattered cared. He was reelected overwhelmingly after that came out.
Yeah.
LBJ forced into not running for reelection.
I do not see, and I will not accept another term as your president. Is that not what he said?
Something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I think the whole Vietnam thing just seems like enough of a scandal in itself with all the protests and everything.
Pretty much. I would agree with that. We'll give it to TJ?
Yeah.
Give it to TJ.
We are down to our final category.
It's the final hand of presidential war. And I have flipped second term, Grover Cleveland.
And I've got George Washington.
And the category, domestic policy. Well, now, I think by default, this is a George Washington hand.
Yeah, George Washington, pretty huge. Domestic policy-wise.
Integral in terms of formulating a domestic policy.
The entire government established under his watch. First cabinet, first entire Supreme Court. Successful Indian War. Whether you like it or not, he was successful in that policy. He won also the Whiskey Rebellion, establishing federal authority to enforce its laws and taxes.
And that brings us to Grover Cleveland's second-term domestic policy, which is what pretty much brings him down in my overall presidential ranking list. And I still like Grover Cleveland, but I think his second term was pretty troubled. We had the Panic of 1893. We had the Pullman Strike. The Pullman Strike, that's the Pullman Palace Car Company, reducing employees' wages. They went on strike. Eugene V. Debs comes into the story. Best way to learn about him is to listen to the War Shots, Would-Be President series, the Eugene V. Debs song.
Yep.
Federal troops were dispatched. Breaking the strike. Debs goes to jail. It wasn't incredibly popular.
No.
What Cleveland did there. And then you have the Panic of 1893. That's brought on by the failure of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad. And you got a 4-year depression that Cleveland wasn't able to really do anything to help. He repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act we spoke of earlier.
Whereas Washington, when he sent in the military against the Whiskey Rebellion, it was popular.
Yeah.
And he pardoned the the guys who got charged with treason. And I forgot to mention earlier, the whole Hamilton fiscal policy established under Washington. And he put his name behind that and backed it when it wasn't necessarily popular with some people who didn't like Hamilton and what he was doing. Washington made it happen. Also, the choosing of Washington, D.C. as the capital city.
Indeed. Many, many presidents. Basically, listeners, this was not a challenge. This was a summation of what these fellas did. And some good, some bad, but it's all George Washington, baby.
He's going to take the hand.
He's going to take the hand.
And that
we're going to take a sec to count some cards.
See who won. I got 24.
And I've got 20. It looks like the score is the same as last time.
That's all right by me.
It's all right by me too, James, because, as we've oft stated, it's about you winning, listeners.
Yep.
It's about you winning through the acquisition of knowledge provided by us here at the Dead Presidents Podcast.
The true winner, our collective intellect, which is vibrating with much stimulation.
Indeed.
After another classic game of presidential war.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.